The break in the chain. The room felt routine until the presence broke format. The tones hit their held breath, the marker flashed, arc, line, tick, and a block opened with a line I'd never seen. Reference prior, operator misled. My pen hovered. The presence didn't push images that aren't images this time. It pressed phrases that carried weight. I wrote prior statement, false, handler origin, and felt the temperature behind the glass drop. The block pushed again. A site I'd labeled stable had been moved up the internal priority list weeks earlier for reasons never logged to me. I wrote internal reroute, silent. The legal pad in the next room stopped moving. Debrief came fast and brittle. Interpretational drift, the handler said, not looking at me. You're reading tone. I slid the pages back toward the slot. Tone didn't say it. The block did. He didn't like that sentence. A new uniform showed and asked, "Are you asserting the source has visibility on our deliberations?" I kept my face still. I'm describing what I received. He stared long enough to make it a warning. The next session was scheduled earlier than usual. Meanwhile, something else was happening I wasn't meant to know. A coffee spill on the wrong desk left a page where my eyes could land. Another operator's Idoggrams, different hand, same lexicon. Coordinates clustered far from mine, with the marker drawn not as arcline tick, but as a hard angular glyph. Under it, presence cold mechanical timbre. The note wasn't theatrics. It was a technician's complaint. I folded the image into memory and stepped back into my room. The divergence arrived like a draft from a door swinging open in winter. The tones hit their gap and two signatures pressed at once. One familiar, rounded cadence, intervals that breathed. The other cut like a blade, rigid, stepped, all edges. Blocks collided. One said window, observe, warn. The other arrived as optimize, reset, throughput. I wrote both and bracketed the second with mechanical effect, because effect is what it felt like. The handler's voice thinned. Maintain separation. I split the page, left side for the marker I knew, right side for the new glyph I didn't. Data turned to a tug of war. The known presence pushed corridors with conditional flags. If X and Y align, risk rises. The colder signal pushed imperatives, reduce load, shutter nodes, reroute populations. The first carried timing and patience. The second carried command logic that didn't care about faces. I wrote the words I didn't want to see next to each other. Two timelines. In the glass, someone whispered, finally, like they'd been waiting for a second voice to show its teeth. Don't arbitrate, the handler said in my ear. You log. But my nervous system had its own vote. The colder stream tightened my jaw. The familiar marker eased it. I logged both and felt sick at the bias I couldn't prevent. The mechanical feed tagged an inland hub for preemptive deactivation. I translated the phrase into our lexicon, standby closure, and then against protocol wrote human cost high. The handler hit the intercom hard. Stay neutral. I drew a box around my sentence so it would be easy to delete later. I didn't delete it. The push escalated. The known presence adjusted cadence to ride above the rigid blocks, as if trying to keep signal integrity. It pressed a correction across my right-hand page, soft but insistent. Monitor, not mandate. I wrote it between the two streams like a thin fence. The colder glyph didn't acknowledge the line. It intensified, adding targeted delay authorized. Authorized by whom? I didn't write the question. My chest answered anyway. I quit mid-session. Not dramatic. I uncapped the pen, set it down, and said, I'm done for today. The silence after that sentence shook more than any tone. The glass didn't move. Then the door opened and two people I'd never met stepped in, polite and immovable. Take a walk, one said. Clear your head. I walked the hall, counted ceiling panels, returned to the chair, and didn't sit. Tomorrow, I said. Or never. I went home and sat in my car until the afterglow curdled. Consequences came on schedule. My badge twitched red at the morning gate. The guard's eyes slid past me like I was a stain on glass. System error, he said. It wasn't. A wellness check hit my apartment before noon. Two men with clipboard smiles, noting medications I didn't take and friends I didn't see. When I came back that night, my drawers were too neat. A hair caught in the hinge that wasn't mine confirmed the sweep. Colleagues stopped being reachable. Numbers that had always answered now rang into a cushion. When a former coworker finally picked up at midnight, he paused at my name like it was a password from a dead language and said, wrong number. For 2 days I tried to stop the tones in my head by filling the air with noise. Radio, TV, highway. The tones threaded through anyway, soft as breath. low, mid-high, then the gap. I heard them in the refrigerator hum. I heard them in the train brakes. When I finally let the room go quiet, the presence arrived, fainter but there. No chair, no glass, no pen, just intervals landing in that inner field the calibration had carved open. The marker flashed once, thin as chalk on wet stone. I whispered, "I can't log you," to an empty kitchen. It didn't answer. It held. Meanwhile, I began to suspect what nobody knew in my room at first. We weren't the only conduit. Other chairs, other basements, other hands learning the same lexicon with different mentors and different cover stories. The angular glyph in that spilled page wasn't mine. It belonged to someone trained to mesh with the colder stream. That would explain the confidence with which the mechanical blocks issued mandates. Someone somewhere gave it doors. Someone somewhere liked its orders. I considered calling a reporter. The impulse died in one syllable. What would I say? That voices in a tone gap argued over the future, while men with legal pads chose who lives higher on a triage map. The presence pressed again, bringing none of that theater, just the lattice, the windows, the restraint. It refused to be apocalyptic. I realized that had been the hook all along. The colder stream promised control. The familiar one insisted on warning. Both were intolerable to people who needed certainty on a schedule. The next morning, I walked back to the building out of muscle memory and stood at the threshold where my badge used to turn the red dot green. It stayed red. The guard didn't look up. I turned away, walked the length of the lot, and kept going until the hum of the perimeter lights fell behind me. Outside the fence, the tones followed, loyal as breath, cruel as gravity. I bought a cheap spiral notebook at a drugstore and wrote in block letters on the first page. Shadow log continues. No facility logo. No legal pad. No handler's pen scratch to pace me. I expected the presence to go thin without the hardware handshake. It didn't. The interval held. The marker flashed like a distant light through fog. I wrote what arrived slower, less clean, without the net of instrumentation. It felt like trespassing. It also felt like refusing to let a record be erased. 2 nights later, I woke at 3:11 to the cold stream's glyph, bright and angular against my closed eyes. It pressed a block that wasn't a warning, it was a plan. Optimize, reset, throughput again, but this time with site classes aligned to decisions people in plain suits had just started making. I sat up, turned on the lamp, and finally said out loud what I had refused to see: data war. 2 signatures. 2 agendas. I was in the middle only as long as I agreed to be a wire they owned. I closed the notebook and slept for an hour. In the morning, I drafted a resignation I couldn't file. You don't resign from a thing that doesn't officially exist. You just stop showing up and accept they'll call that instability. I decided on a different word, unowned. Then I made a second decision that would matter more than I wanted it to. I'd keep logging from outside and I'd prepare, in case the day came when the choice wasn't between clean data and messy conscience, but between silence and witness. Going public with a story nobody wants. The day I realized silence was a choice, not a rule, I opened the shadow log and saw my own handwriting arguing with me. Dates, intervals, the arc line tick, and a thin column of reactions. The record was clean. The rooms were not. Continuity of governance rang in my head like a bell you can't unhear. I wasn't going to leak a sensation. I was going to publish receipts, dates, session logs, anonymized memos, and the dull math of windows and corridors. Not as proof of aliens, as proof of warnings and what they were being used for. I started with the logs no one could claim as theirs. Handwritten pages I'd scanned to a drive never on their network, with metadata scrubbed, then scrubbed again. I built a timeline that didn't accuse individuals, just showed what arrived, when it aligned, and how drills moved. Every triangle date sat beside a public artifact if one existed. A utility bulletin, a maritime notice, a safety drill. Where alignment had no public echo, I wrote no visible action and left it cold. I included the misses too. The misses mattered. Gatekeepers came fast. A national outlet answered on the second ring, listened for 5 minutes, and said, "We need names." I had names. I also had a responsibility not to hand them over like fodder. The editor sighed like I'd wasted his time. A publisher asked for narrative arc and exclusivity, then slid the contract across with clauses that sounded like preemptive surrender. A producer loved the beats but wanted drama. Tears on camera, a midnight parking lot, a coded meeting in a diner. I told her the story didn't need movie lighting. She told me everything needs lighting. I stripped it down and posted the first tranche myself, Scans, transcriptions, a short preface, what the program asked, what the presence refused to do, what the dates looked like before anyone turned them into leverage. I redacted the site qualifiers to classes and replaced coordinates with hash identifiers. I thought I'd feel lighter. I felt exposed. Within hours, my inbox was a split screen. Accusations of delusion on one side, demands for more on the other. The middle stayed quiet, which is standard when people sense risk. Interviews followed, clipped to fringe. A late-night radio host let me talk long enough to say lattice of timing, before pivoting to cattle mutilations. A podcast booked me for 2 hours, then cut it down to 20 minutes with synth behind my voice. A local station rolled B-roll of grain silos and called it Secret Bases. I said 2 signatures once softly. They took it out. The editor told me afterward. It muddies the story. The story was mud by design. Allies appeared where you'd never pitch a show. A geomagnetism researcher with a Grant scar called from a state school office with fluorescent buzz. He had spreadsheets of KP anomalies and a habit of laughing when angry. Your windows rhyme with my spikes, he said, and sent plots that felt like déjà vu. A mythology professor reached out from a department that had just lost 2 faculty to restructuring. She'd spent 10 years cataloging flood narratives as procedural memory. Boats aren't metaphors, she said. They're instructions. We compared notes and didn't try to make them fit faster than they wanted. Corroborations arrived sideways. An obscure seismic station's monthly bulletin noted unexpected microseisms consistent with long-period swells, dated inside one of my triangles. A test range shut down for maintenance the week I'd marked a solar cluster and a crustal corridor overlap. The base paper ran a photo of a sunrise over empty tarmac and a quote about safety culture. The comment section mocked them for wasting money. In my notebook, I wrote alignment acknowledged in silence and hated how bitter the sentence tasted. Counterpressure wasn't dramatic. It was efficient. A think tank blog with a patriotic logo posted a tidy character smear, unstable, disgruntled, unverifiable. A former colleague, faceless in an article, said I'd always been imaginative, like that was a defect in a signals shop. Old classmates I hadn't heard from in years sent texts that read like concern and scanned like scripts. Are you okay? I was okay, if okay meant sleeping 4 hours and jumping at refrigerator hums. The unresolved became a weapon. Misses were held up as proof of fabrication. Grazes were mocked as cold reading. A port drill that mirrored a warning was proof that drills work. A transformer trip without blackout was proof the grid is resilient. Threads filled with people who needed absolutes the way a kid needs handrails. The whole point of probability arcs is that the future isn't a single line. I typed that sentence once and deleted it. No one hears sermons. They hear scenes. So I told micro-stories with receipts. A safety officer in a hard hat posting a selfie at dawn captioned "Weird Day." A crew chief joking about the sun being spicy in a group text that accidentally leaked when someone forwarded it to a spouse. A crane operator writing in a private forum about tie-down protocols being overkill. The weakest swell made overkill look like prudence. None of it proved a presence. All of it proved coordination under covers. Meanwhile, the colder stream found its way into my public life without showing its face. A DM landed from an account with 2 posts and a join date from that morning. Your right-hand column misrepresents optimization goals. I hadn't posted my right-hand column. Only 3 people had seen those pages. The message linked to a PDF that looked like a policy draft for throughput preservation under duress. It read like the angular glyph with HR's smile. I closed it and wrote "Data War Goes Retail" on a sticky note I didn't keep. I met a reporter in a park, because that's what people who think they're being watched do. He wore a cap and didn't pretend it mattered. He asked why I cared if the warnings saved even a few. I said because the lattice didn't select us for perfection. It selected for resilience under stress, and resilience collapses when information is gated like oxygen. He nodded like he'd heard a version of that from people with different ghosts. He promised a long-form piece. His editor killed it in favor of a listicle about space junk. I kept publishing in chapters. I added a section that made me sick to write, missed calls, dates that passed without incident, windows that narrowed into nothing. I left them in. They cleared the signal. They also made weaponization easy. See? Nothing. Meanwhile, 3 small things that could have been disaster weren't, because quiet hands moved valves and paused trains and redirected ships under covers. I started writing quiet wins in the margins and circled them like people. Friends peeled off. Two stuck and learned to sit in silence with me when the tones threaded through the fridge. One brought casseroles and said, "You look thin," which was true. Another handed me printouts of geomagnetic graphs and said, "I don't like the way this one slopes," which made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Laughter helped. It didn't change the slope. Through the noise, one pattern kept surfacing like a watermark. The presence never broke its two non-negotiables, even when it hurt to hold them. No broadcast, no direct interference. It kept offering timing in corridors and the stubborn refusal to instrument a conscience. The other stream kept promising control. The rooms I used to sit in kept choosing leverage. I kept writing, because writing was the only way to keep the shape of the signal from being bent past recognition. I wasn't trying to convince the world. I was trying to build a record that would matter when the story stopped being interesting and started being useful. So I ended one chapter with a sentence that had no drama in it at all. If you run drills in secret and call the near misses luck, you teach people that luck is policy. Then I hit publish and went for a walk in a neighborhood that didn't know it sat under a lattice, just that the trees were turning and the river smelled like rain. What the entity knew about us. Time was the first correction. We treat it like a map with roads and milestones. The presence kept handing me fog, thick, structured, with currents running through it. I wrote time equals medium, not measure, and felt the interval respond, like I'd finally named the water we swim in. Windows weren't dates, they were clearings in that fog when signals could cross. We miss them because our calendars are flat, and theirs aren't. Then came the inventory, and it wasn't just Earth. The block opened like a cutaway of reality's wiring. Conscious systems embedded in matter, nested like organs. Biosphere networks, human social lattices, machine feedbacks, all entangled by timing. I wanted to call it spiritual. The presence refused that shorthand. It pressed coherent systems, then resonance thresholds. I wrote both and underlined resonance until the paper feathered. When thresholds dip, windows open. When windows open, influence travels farther with less push. Human origins arrived like a painful kindness. Not clay to man. Not ape to astronaut by accident. Selected traits under pressure, resilience over perfection. Repair, not purity. Social bonding that spikes under scarcity. Pattern extraction that hunts meaning in noise. I wrote them as bullet lines because the block insisted on clarity. Then I wrote what hurt. Imperfections retained adaptive value. Anxiety as early warning. Forgetting as scar tissue. I crossed out flaw and replaced it with reserve. The interval pulsed in agreement. It pushed projects within the project. We weren't a one-off. We were one branch among many attempts, timelines pruned and grafted. The word vector gained new edges, genetic, yes, but also cultural. Stories as code. Rituals as checksum. I wrote myths equals protocol carriers across collapses, and felt the presence lean in. Floods weren't fables. Fire that doesn't burn wasn't metaphor. These were procedures surviving in song and stone long after libraries drowned. A boat is a speck. A mountain is a checkpoint. A sky wound is a system failure note. Here's where the machine question got answered without being asked. Why a human mind? Compression and context. The intervals carried more than tone. Machines parsed the notes and missed the gap. Humans live in the gap. We resolve ambiguity by weight and memory. The presence pressed, context resolves under compression, and I finally understood the chair. The calibration didn't make me psychic. It tuned me to read the silence between beats where meaning hides when energy is thin. Gear can amplify a note. It can't annotate why a pause feels like a warning, not a rest. Meanwhile, the inventory expanded to things we don't file in science. Places that remember. Objects that store timing in their shape. I wrote architecture as host, and the interval steadied. Stone rings as clocks. Causeways as waveguides. Pilgrimages as maintenance cycles performed by people who forgot the math but kept the march. The block showed hands smoothing an edge because it felt right.